Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Stephen, Rav Shmuel with Temple Shalom of Ontario with this week's 10-minute Torah. So, we've got the high holidays coming up very soon. Actually, they've pretty much started. We typically start the high holidays with the month of Elul. And I know it's a month before Tishrei, which is when Rosh Hashanah starts, but it's kind of a lead up. You know, it's that important that we take a whole month to kind of start thinking about it and looking at our behavior, looking at our character, and looking for ways to improve, which is really what Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, and Simchat Torah really are all about. We want to be better people. That's why we study Torah. And in the month of Elul, we start reciting Psalm 27 in the morning and in the evening. And in the morning, we blow the shofar. It's kind of a wake-up call, and that's really what the shofar is. It's a wake-up call. And Psalm 27, the Lord is my, the Psalm of David, the Lord is my light. And again, it gets us prepared. It gets us in that mode, because that's what Judaism is all about. It's about being better people. What did Hillel say? What is hateful to you, don't do others. The rest is commentary. Really kind of sums up the high holidays in that one verse. This Thursday, speaking of which, we're going to depart from our adult ed from Pirkei Avot to start talking a little bit about Rosh Hashanah and the high holidays in general. I'll draw from the Talmud. I'll draw from some of the Machzorim that I have, and we'll have a good discussion. Okay, so Ki Teitzei, when you go to battle. Ki Teitzei Milchama, when you go to battle. In this particular portion, the commentary in the Eitz Chaim Humash states that there's probably more commandments in this particular portion than probably any other portion in Deuteronomy, and maybe the whole Torah. Now, it would be interesting to match it up with Kedoshim, which is in the middle of Leviticus, and some say it's right in the middle of the Torah, Kedoshim, that has a lot of commandments too. So it'd be interesting. It's kind of the Kedoshim of Deuteronomy, let's put it that way. And we're coming to the end of Moses' second discourse, when he's preparing and briefing the Israelites, this new generation born in the desert. And those of you that are familiar with the term, Sabras. Sabra refers to an Israeli that was born in Israel. Of course, after many generations, that term isn't used very much anymore, but Sabra is a cactus. That's what it means. A cactus grows up in the desert, as do some of the Israelites and the Israelis. So it talks about when you go out to war. And there's a couple of commandments that talk about character. And they say that in the heat of battle, and it starts out, and this is a little R-rated, but then again, our behavior is R-rated, right? Think about it. When a man is conscripted and to the army, and it's a citizen army, each Israelite has a place in the army. When they go in, and when they're in the middle of battle, they might see a woman from their enemy that appeals to them. And how do you handle it? And maybe they have relations. But then maybe the soldier wants to take this woman home and make her wife. Well, there's respect for the captive woman. And she is to be left alone for a month. She is to shave her hair, shave her nails. In other words, not look so attractive. And she's also allowed to grieve for her family. And then after that month, if the man still wants her, then he marries her and makes her a wife. See? So again, we're talking about base emotions, and we're talking about respect as well. See? So the next part of this portion talks about the wayward son. And it talks about a son that just can't control himself or doesn't want to control himself, and he becomes excessive with drink and food, and he shows disrespect to his parents. Now, why does this follow after the particular discussion of taking a captive woman as a wife? Because this is a woman that may be there against her will. Maybe she sees this as an opportunity. Maybe she feels there's no other options for her in her life, and she has to make the best of it. The point is, though, is that she wasn't raised with Torah. This is a pagan that has certain ideas. and they don't have the type of morality or ethics that someone who's brought up with Torah may have. Now, I know that's a bold statement, but you know what? That's what Torah is all about. The Torah was given to the Israelites, think about this, in response to the pagan ethics, or lack thereof, that was going on in the ancient world. These people worshiped things. They did things to appease these so-called gods, the heavenly bodies, the natural forces. And in fact, part of this portion, one of the commandments, is not to expose the children to any rites, rites, that would endanger them. And yes, take that to extreme. Again, this is R-rated. There were some cultures that freely practiced child sacrifice. So this is the mentality that we may be dealing with. A woman that comes into the fold, into the congregation of Israel, and may not have the background that maybe the father does. So what happens is that they don't have the type of moral background to impart to their sons, so the son grows up without Torah. And maybe they're used to giving in to their base urges. And part of those base urges is that they don't want to listen to their parents. Now, the penalty for this is very severe and maybe inhumane by our reckoning. Maybe the idea of battle is inhumane to our reckoning, especially in modern times. But then again, war brings out the worst in people. You're exposed to some very heavy emotional trauma, PTSD. That's what we see. The whole point of this is to say, you know what? War is unfortunately at this point part of human experience. And of course, as Jews, we pray for the coming of the Mashiach, when, nation will not lift up sword against nation, nor they will beat their swords into plowshares, right? But at this point, we still have to deal with war. Look at Israel right now. It's going through war. Missiles being fired. They're trying to, and the Israeli army and the Israeli Air Force makes as much attempt as possible to just target the offenders, the soldiers and the generals, and Hamas in this case, that is firing the missiles and trying to leave the civilian population alone and in peace. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. You have collateral damage. That's what these commandments are designed to address. And it's interesting that trying to instill morality during a situation where morality just goes right out the window, right? Because when you're in the heat of battle, what are you doing? You're trying to survive, and you want to vanquish the enemy quickly so that you can get back to your normal civilian life. And that's why they're in place. So the point is that the Torah is trying to instill some morality. Now, the point of this too is that the sages say this sentence has never been carried out. It was there as a warning, as a way to tell people, be careful when you do these type of things, when you take somebody from a foreign people. Additionally, there's some other commandments too that may seem disjointed, but again, Moses is trying to impress upon these Israelites that are going in to take the promised land that you have to live a moral life, and he's trying to let them know what those commandments are. Trying to impress upon them and give them a basis for which to live a righteous life. Another thing is that they said, we talk about a king writing out, the Torahs and everything. Another thing is the idea of putting two different species together. Now, the word is kalayim, and this is when you mix fabrics, all right? When you put wool with cotton, which you're not supposed to do. Why? The big reason is they say that God created everything separate, and we leave it separate. We don't mess with God's creation. Some of the sages believe that the only people that can mix wool and cotton, wool is from an animal and cotton is from a plant, and part of it is that you don't mix animals and plants together. But the priests, right? They wore their garments, and they put a thread of wool, the tzitzit, on cotton garments. And this was a discussion that they had in the Talmud. Why did they do that? Because they're priests. And some people say, well, they don't want, the Am Haaretz, which back then just meant, the common people. Am Haaretz, that phrase has taken on a more of a negative connotation as time's gone on. But the point is that you don't want people, emulating the priests. The priests are the priests, and the people are the people, right? So you don't want people thinking that. Also talks about men not dressing as women, things like that, right? So it's very interesting that you have these a lot of various commandments. Okay, so let's leave it at that. I know there's other things here, but let's leave it at that. Maybe next year we'll talk about some of the other commandments. So hope to see you Thursday at our Adult Ed, where we'll talk about the high holidays. Looking forward to seeing you for our Zoom services. Yes, consistently, Friday night, 7:30, Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Look forward to seeing you. Shabbat Shalom.